5 years. 5 years for what? For fishing. I lost my cool in there. I was there with, Bill Haig, Australia's first Aboriginal chiropractor. We were delivering a couple of talks to the prisoners, incarcerated souls. And I lost my cool and I go, what? I wanted to march him out. I just said, we should march you out right now, whatever. 5 years for what? For fishing, off a boat, or whatever, for that. Okay, and it's a hidden secret. We've got the drama that's happening actually at Darwin at the moment, but this is all, part and parcel of the fact that we're not a transparent society in this country, and that we need this data to get out to community, or whatever, to get them to think about what's actually going on. I know I've digressed completely, but I still can't get over the fact that these people are serving 5 years. 5 years, and they get it all now mandatorily. Whatever, 5 years for fishing off a boat to feed everybody on that boat or whatever, And how big a catch could they have got themselves with, whatever, even if they found some way to get back, or whatever, with that catch. And even if they were making a little bit of money to feed their impoverished families in their place of origin, and took this risk to, travel on these boats to feed the crew, people, and you've got to actually consider if the people smugglers, the so-called evil people smugglers as they're branded, are actually getting these people onto boats to feed these people, at least they're thinking about getting them alive to where they're trying to get them to, or whatever. Right? The whole people smuggle thing's a different story in itself. It's a neologism in a sense, or whatever, from 1980 with the People Smugglers Act. I won't go down there. It was about branding, and I think Malcolm Fraser played a part in all that too, whatever. Right? He's changed his ways once he got involved with Care Australia or whatever, but he's got to stand up and actually account for what he did, contributed to that in 1980. But anyway, we have, I think, a scandal in waiting in this country. The fact is, I've written to a lot of media, and a lot of media in the East is picking up on this story, that we've actually had 1,442 deaths in custody from 1980 to 2000, and 601 deaths in custody from 2000 to 2007, and we're going at 80, 90 a month, and there's been like an Aboriginal death in custody every month of the last 18 months, somewhere in this country, every month of the last 18 months. Let us not forget that Aboriginal brothers and sisters are 2.5 to about 2.8%, those who identify, of the Australian population. Okay, and their incarceration rates range from anything depending on, whether they're juveniles, male, female, from 26 times to 51 times those of our non-Aboriginal brothers and sisters. And the reality is, it's at that level, at the incarceration rate, that the proportion of deaths in custody, or whatever age, emanate from and correlate to. And that means we have substandard practices in this country. We have discriminatory practices in this country. We are harsh in terms of our, prison services and police services and the people that, power these services or whatever, and the treatment of these other people or whatever. We know the horrific things that a lot of police officers and prison officers did in the 60s, 70s and 80s. And the 80s in the state. We know of the beatings that they gave prisoners to get a confession out of them, or those who were actually arrested on suspicion of whatever. We know that once police officers, had a belief that someone was guilty of something, that they did beat a confession out of them. Some of these people, have retired, but that's only 2 decades ago. How much of that is actually filtered out, and how much of that has still remained as judgment of people, especially in their treatment? Let's look at Mr. Ward. What's lost in WA is how many people are actually dying in custody, and what it took for people to take notice. 43 degrees was the temperature on that day he died. They say it reached 55 degrees in the back of a van, but that van had 2 compartments at the back. 2 compartments, and they say there's no criminal negligence. 2 compartments. One was actually working, air conditioned, and the other one wasn't. And they put him in the one that wasn't working, or whatever. It didn't matter if one was for a female, the other one for a male, or one was for alleged sexual predators, and they wanted to separate them from the others. On that day when they drove him from Laverton to Kalgoorlie, there was no one else other than the drivers in the air-conditioned front, or whatever, and those 2 units at the back. Now, we had a paramedic, a former paramedic, as one of the drivers, and you don't need to be a paramedic to actually have the logic to know that on a 40-plus day, in a confined bare metal van, and if you put this person in the one that's not got the working air conditioning, that he's not going to make it. And if it's true that he was allegedly inebriated, he's dehydrated, he's not going to make it, or whatever. That is negligence. Call it whatever you want. You don't need new laws, corporate manslaughter laws or industrial manslaughter laws that have been argued now to defend the decisions of the time. What you need is to actually accept that there was negligence, and the DPP DBP failed to actually explore and test the circumstances of the situation. Now, let's look at this. I've just said there's 1,442 deaths in custody from 1980 to 2,601 since. How many have been explored? You can't have the police investigating themselves. You can't have corrective services investigating themselves. You know, you've got to have someone independent. And I'll argue that the DBP is part of the police or whatever, even though it is, you know, demarcated as an independent agency. But if the Mr. Domergy and the Hurley incident, the Officer Hurley incident in Queensland is the only one ever to be tested outside internal affairs or whatever, and only, let's remember, because a police station got burnt down at Palm Island or whatever, the protests were immense, people took to the streets. Eventually, you know, the Premier of the state was put in a position where they had to bring in an independent, presumably independent magistrate from New South Wales who did come in and actually found findings adverse or whatever, and that arguably, you know, interpreted findings as there was systemic racism. The beatings did actually happen, but still we've had no real outcome from that, okay? And we've had no outcomes for more than 2,000, actually if we add the deaths I put together, 2,043 deaths from 1980 to 2007. 2,043 deaths, and is everybody going to tell us in this, in terms of mathematical probability, not one should have made it to a court, that our laws in this country aren't substantive enough for any one of those to have been tested in a court of law? They don't even make it to a court of law, you know, to be executed in terms of a preliminary judgment, whatever. No one has ever been arraigned. Yet, if someone gets arrested in Northbridge for breaching a curfew, or for littering even, or for abusing a police officer or a security guard, or, you know, or that person will be charged. And that person will, in a sense, it's like Lashitsky's law, you are guilty till you're proven innocent, in the sense that you do go before a court for a judge to make a decision of whether there's a case for you to once you go past the mention state, to actually, you know, be accused of, or whatever, right, and then challenged. And yet we've never had any police officer, we've never had any prison officer, we've never had anyone within any form of custodial services, we've never had, you know, charged, asked to account for themselves. And this is what actually goes on. But I think the biggest thing that we need to do is actually try and get out everywhere we can the fact that there have been 1,442 deaths in custody, okay? And whether they be deaths by police pursuit, whether they be deaths in the back of a prison transport van, whether they be deaths in a cell, whether they be deaths because someone bled to death in a cell because they weren't treated or hospitalised or left there to die, whether they be deaths by hanging because someone took their life because they couldn't cope with the fact that they were living free in a cell or whatever, right? In some of the smallest cells we have in the prison system. And don't forget, in this country, we actually have the highest privatisation of our prison systems in the Western world, or whatever, right? Higher than America, or whatever, the US. And our incarceration rates of actually Aboriginal brothers and sisters are actually higher than the Aboriginal incarceration rates of, if we argue, the American Indians in America, or whatever, right? And similarly, the Aboriginal people of Canada, and similarly to Aboriginal people, the Maoris of New Zealand. We have higher incarcerations than all of them, so something's wrong with this country and we don't talk about it. Whatever it's got to do with, we can't buy into it anymore. The Australian silence, or meritocracy, or class divisions, or racism or discrimination. What we need to do is actually get the system to start looking at itself, and politicians to start asking the big questions. We have 76 senators in the Australian Senate, and we have 150 in the House of Representatives federally, and we have everyone else at state levels. In the state, I think it's 69 or something, the two houses. We've got to move on those people to pick up the story, because it's a scandal in waiting, to do what they've got to do and how, and also encourage as many people to start, you know, finding out more by going to the Deaths in Custody website, by researching a lot of this information themselves. And for me, what I'm doing is doing my PhD on this, and hopefully I'll have it out in a year or two rather than, you know, the 5 or 6 years it usually takes to do. Put a document together, like I've sent off submissions to the United Nations, but it's not the United Nations who will sort out our affairs, or whatever, right? It's actually Australians that will have to sort out their own affairs. I might leave it at that. I know I got way over time, but what we're doing to actually educate people at the moment are the banner protests all over Perth. We did it at Subiaco Oval where we dropped the banner. at a game with Fremantle on the West Coast when they did their derby, and they allowed us to leave the banner there off one of the stadiums or whatever, right? We did it at Kings Park, we've done it on bridges, the overpasses on the freeway, and we're going to keep on doing this or whatever, Deaths in Custody Watch Committee campaign to educate people what's gone on, and that it hasn't stopped with the fact that some of the Ward family, the Mr. Ward family, scored some compensation. What price on a human life? Whatever, he's never going to come back. What we need to be about is the overhaul of the system, that people have a right to care and have a right to their rights within, any form of the custodial system, be it prison, be it police, or whatever, right? And that people aren't abrogated of that. We also have to improve police pursuit policies, we have to improve our jails or whatever, right? They've got to have an ethos of care, and we have to ensure that people who should not be in jail aren't in jail, whatever, right? And this is the only way to actually have a civil and just society. And for all the good that we have in this country, there are people that we have it or whatever that don't have it. And we have a high standard of living, but there's a big portion of this country, population, Aboriginal brothers and sisters, and the poorest of the working classes, and those who are unemployed, who do not have that standard of living, and also do not have rights, or have had many of their rights eroded and abrogated, and they don't have the capacity to be represented. And it's pretty sad that it takes an unfunded small group like the Deaths in Custody Watch Committee, like the activist groups that are actually out there, Socialist Alliance and the Greens too, and others, to actually argue and get up, the organisation get up to argue some of the things that we know. But what we need to do is get this out, this en masse dissemination through all the big mediums or whatever. And the media is disgraceful that it hasn't picked up a story purely on the stats alone. And we've had 2,043 deaths in custody from 1980 to 2007. But if you guys can encourage more people to come to the Deaths in Custody Watch Committee campaign meetings, which are at 5:30 every Wednesday at 445 Hay Street, East Perth, that's Unions WA building level 4, that'd be cool. And anyone who wants to get involved with campaigns, that'd be great. And anyone who wants to research more can find out from the website and can research data from the Australian Bureau of Statistics and the Australian Institute of Criminology, and can also contact me, or whatever. And if Zeb can put out my email on this, that'd be good. Gerry_Georgatos at yahoo.com.au. Look, I've even encouraged people to do their masters and postgraduate research projects in deaths in custody, Aboriginal deaths in custody and Australian deaths in custody. Because the more documents we get out, the more we make others aware of what's actually going on, and the more pressure we put on people that should have long ago, if they believed in their political career as a calling, picked up on this and raised a goddamn bill or a private member's bill in one of the houses to argue the house down. And that disappoints me greatly, that we've got to work so hard always at that grassroots activist level to just get people aware of what I know that they're already aware of, but the story isn't big enough for them in terms of the volume of people that are actually aware of it. Whatever. And it's the same with many other the refugee perceptions that we actually have in this country, asylum seekers and all that sort of stuff. But we've got to debunk myths here, and we've got to get the facts out, and we've got to make people stand up and raise their hair or whatever, on their arms or on their back, everything or whatever, to what's actually going on. And okay, cool, that's it.